What's up?
Hello, how are you?
Pretty good.
So today I want to go ahead and start off this with a definition from the American Heritage Dictionary, third edition. And I want to go ahead and give you guys a dictionary definition of the word terrorism, which is a noun, and it basically means the political use of violence or intimidation. And it's associated with a verb called to terrorize or terrorizing, and that is to terrify, which is one definition, or to coerce by intimidation or fear. So we're going to talk about that. What exactly is this word terrorism? And this is coming from a concept when I was listening to the news this morning, and I was actually driving. Well, we and I were actually driving, and we were listening to Morning Edition, which is on National Public Radio, and we heard a discussion, and it was basically in conjunction or it related to this whole news with the Boston bombing and them finding these guys. And basically, on 420, Morning Edition, they were saying there's this guy who has his own political blog called the Muslim Guy, I guess that's what it's called, and he was just talking about how, as a Muslim, he said he felt kind of uncomfortable with how the media was so quick to use the guys as being terrorisms or calling them terrorists or their act terrorism because they're Islamic. But then he says, oh, wow, now, his religion is going to be attacked. But then in comparison to such things like Sandy Hook in Connecticut, they were not considered terrorism. Or the guy who basically was in the school with a knife and slashing people in a campus in Texas wasn't considered terrorism. Or the movie theater shooting in Colorado where the white guy who dyed his hair and he wasn't considered terrorism. Or when you have in Georgia where he basically held firemen underground and he was considered terrorism. Or the mall shootings. Or the guy who was holding a child in his bunker. I mean, it goes on and on, like how those people who are Americans weren't considered terrorism, but yet because these people were considered associated to a religion, was considered terrorism. So what do you think about that? Is that a fair way to consider association of religion terrorism as opposed to people who are homegrown?
Man, I don't think it's fair.
And Tim McVeigh could be considered homegrown, I guess.
I don't think it's fair, but I just think, and I always seem like I always come off as pessimistic in these videos, but I always just think, in actuality, it just reflects a trait in American culture where anything foreign than you, especially if you don't understand it, becomes scary. So I think what happens is with Islam, most Americans don't really know about Muslims. So the first thing that comes to your mind is terrorists, because it's foreign than you. So even Timothy McVeigh, who was still considered a domestic terrorist, because he was American, people didn't really, it wasn't as scary, even though he did a heinous crime. And I just think it just goes into it's a flaw in the American mentality that if you don't understand something and it's foreign, it has to be double, then you consider terrorist.
But then to be just to say, like, according to dictionary, it doesn't say anything about being foreign. It says the political use of violence. But what I'm saying, like Tim McVeigh, or there was also a guy who, I think he blew I can't remember saying it off the top of my head, but he threw his plane into an IRS building to make a point. That's all political. So in essence, that's all considered an act of terrorism because it's all political.
Yeah, but once you say political, the term is still going to be flexible depending on what your politics are.
Right.
There's a saying that says one man's freedom fighter is the next man's terrorist. Like, one man's hero is next man's dictator. It just depends on what your politics are.
But then my problem is, if we're listening to the news, then they shouldn't be subjective, even though it can be subjective from a point of view. They should be fair and balanced. Where it's all terrorism because it's all political to each person. Like, if you're going into an IRS building, if you're going into shooting up little kids, that's all an act of terror. So that is terrorism. So as a news, you say these are all terrorism. I'm sorry. But I think, when I think about it, I think the reason they're scared is to call it terrorism because they know that the government is using or classifying the word terrorism to use a lot of their stuff, like drones and stuff. They say, we're not going to subject anything to terrorism, but then there is terrorism happening now that's homegrown. So then that kind of makes the question say, like, well, then if American citizens are terrorism, what does that mean for the rest of us? if we go against the government. I mean, you know what I mean? I don't want to. I hate sounding like a conspiracy theorist. I know I sound like one, but I'm just like just for discussion. What do you think?
I mean, I just think Americans don't want to look at the fundamental flaw in our culture, and I just think what it is that there's so many things. We're a superpower, right? We're all over the world. Because we're a superpower, we're in everybody's business. So because you're in everybody's business, we have interests all over the world. We then have to start doing things proactively in those countries. And some of the things that we do proactively could be bomb people, could be influence people's politics, could be change one leader, one let's say president to the next one. We do all these things, and when we do it, if we bomb a whole village, it's collateral damage. It's the same time our president was talking about crying for Sandy Hook because the kids died. I mean, that same week they bombed up a lot of Pakistani kids, but there was no tears for that.
But isn't that considered an act of terrorizing?
Of course, in some countries they consider us terrorists. Like they consider our intelligence agencies terrorists. But
Americans would never see it as that.
No, because again, it's going back to the fundamental flaw. We don't know about other people, and then we don't know what we're doing, what the government is doing in our name, in other places. We don't know about that. And some people actually do. Some people actually do know about that. Don't care, because if it's not American lives dying, doesn't mean anything. And
right, because I know, like just as this Boston, and my heart and prayers go out to them, and for everyone who was affected by that. I definitely agree that the Boston stuff was terrorism. Same thing with September 11th. Now, some people can speculate. I know Alex Jones, and some people say, "Oh, maybe it's not true." No matter what, any act of terrorizing is terrorism. And I don't care if you're American or if you're from a different religion. Like, it is terrorism. But I think the part is we start to lose our humanity when we try to say one act of terrorism is good versus one is bad. Terrorism is terrorism. If we do it to other people, hey, I'm sorry. As much as I love it, it's still terrorizing. If you are a homegrown terrorist, you don't like it, I may not... your methods are crazy. I consider it terrorism. Like, I don't believe in the act of violence. So it's not just one group is terrorizing. Like, any act of terrorism is terrorism. And I think when we start to label good terrorism versus bad terrorism, then we start to become extreme in our own philosophy of jurisdiction of why we should be able to do it. What do you think?
I agree. Well, I mean, I think people just have to become more aware. And when they become more aware, like, as bad as the corporate news is,
which is owned by how many corporations?
Like six corporations own all corporate news in America. Put it like that, 6.
So basically, corporate media is telling us how to think and feel.
That's radio and that's TV, yes, basically. My whole thing is, though, they're businessmen. End of the day, a businessman is, in the end of the day, his whole objective is about business, about money. And I think that they do that because they can get away with it. When you change your consciousness, when you disconnect from that, when you go on the internet and get your news from the internet, or even if you get your news from foreign sources and American sources, you force them to change. Now, I don't get into conspiracy. I don't get into the boogeyman stuff. Meaning there is a boogeyman, but the boogeyman only has power because you allow it.
That's true.
So that's what I saw. At the end of the day, as bad as they may seem, I understand where they're coming from because they're businessmen and their news is going to fit their politics, and their politics is going to fit the direction where their money is going.
Right. If they're a corporation, then they're going to want to support the corporation and whatever news it is. If you're going to profit from corporation and you're going to profit from media, then they're going to do news that's beneficial to them. For example, on Hardball on April 19th of 2013 with Chris Matthews, he was saying real quick that he was believing these guys are from Yemen. Now, politically, just to understand that, that's connected to with Guantanamo Bay, with Barack Obama still having innocent prisoners in Guantanamo Bay for 10 years. He has made official records saying that they're innocent, but yet he's still keeping them captive. So now they're saying, oh, it's Yemen, 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 because they know through logic that the Yemen people are going to be upset that they still have innocent people who are captive after these years, that they're going to probably do retaliation. So, and I don't know, but I would speculate that the Yemen people probably articulated this. So they're saying, oh, it's Yemen. So they're so quick to associate the Boston people before it came out public that they weren't from Yemen, but they were so quick to try to program the consciousness saying, oh, Yemen are terrorists. But then again, that goes back into foreign policy. How is our foreign policy affects how the world sees us? How do we interact with the world for people to see us as either as freedom fighters or as terrorists? At the same time, they can go ahead and talk about Taliban and Al Qaeda. You know, I know Axe Jones says that Al Qaeda is not real. That I'll leave that up to you guys to decide. But then at the same time, some of our policies has given our money and our missile-guided missiles to these same people that we call terrorism. So if they're terrorism, why are we still giving them support either to fight our enemies, if it's the Soviet or some different group? We're still been giving them weapons, but then what happens is when they have a change of heart, then they use the weapons that we give them to attack us. So then in essence, we're still kind of funding our terrorists to get that back on us. And I even had someone who speculated that in a couple of years, the missile-guided missiles that I think Barack Obama just gave them in maybe 2 months ago, or maybe even like recently, that they might do that on one of our airplanes. It's kind of interesting to see.
I think it's an interesting topic. I think in general, Alex Jones he tends to get into stuff called false flag attacks, which is basically, if you don't know, government sponsored terror. Almost when the government.
I know he talks about that a lot. Like, what does he mean by these false flags attacks?
Well, if 9/11, if the government did 9/11, they did it themselves, right? Then hypothetically, if they did it themselves hypothetically, then that give them an excuse to go and enforce their agenda internationally. That's what the premise of a false flag attack really is. So, at the same time, what happens is that for the most part, there's like a lot of gun control things happening as well.
I know there's
a gun control bill actually didn't pass recently, like 3-4 days ago,
right?
And because
Barack Obama seemed really pissed about that too.
Well, yeah, I mean, in a sense, and because as much as people talk about George Bush, most groups have actually said Barack Obama has been the worst president in terms of civil liberties. Meaning, because before the Boston stuff happened, there wasn't really a terrorist attack since he's been there for a while, because his people have been much more aggressive in terms of breaking civil liberties than George Bush has.
But I mean, George Bush is associated with breaking out the Patriot Act.
Of course, but
the drones is kind of like.
I mean, but you're getting into politics. But for me, it's the same thing. Like, it just, in terms of the civil liberties aspect of it, there hasn't been a terrorist attack because Barack Obama has broken most civil liberties. Like, his drones have killed more drones than the previous administration. That's the whole point. And it's probably going to continue after Barack Obama. The next president can probably be worse. So the thing is, what I think Americans have to do is they just have to be more aware. And they can blame the corporate media, but the corporate media, if you force them to change, they'll change. But if you're going to be one, I think I was watching the show TV, and people were talking about when they had the gunfight right before it. There was a crowd chanting, "Go get them!" When you do that, and it was a tragedy, but you should never cheer death on. I remember when Bin Laden died.
Even if they feel like innocent people have been killed, and like, you know what I mean.
Of course, and I'm not a person who's one of those peace people who believe you always have to have peace. I'm into balance. Sometimes all forces are needed, but you should never cheer death. It's immature and irresponsible. When Bin Laden died, I remember there was some sporting events they were cheering around the world. They were like, "Whoa!"
It looks very bad. It looks very bad.
Exactly. And I'm not a pacifist, but real is real, and life should always be cherished. So I think that, again, we have a lot of things in our culture that we have to start to understand why it is, and because we don't, I think when it's domestic. When the problem is domestic, we don't want to pay attention to it because it forces us to look at ourselves and see why are all these kids shooting people.
Yeah,
and we don't want to do that.
And if you really look at it, when it goes from the Texas with the knife or Sandy Hook or the movie theater, like most of these people are very young adults, and we can blame it on prescription drugs. We can blame it on whatever society, but there has to be a reason why this is happening at a consistent level. Now, we can look at the dynamics of our economics, or we can look at it as radicalism. But at the same time, there has to be a reason for this. But I think what happens is when it's a homegrown or internal, what you want to call it terrorism, even if they won't call it homegrown terrorism, you have to realize, like, there's definitely something wrong with that policies that would really force people to look at it and answer, like, what's going on internally with us that's making or even in the foreign world where the world is upset with us, and more importantly, now we're having people inside our dynamics that's more upset with us, that's going to make them upset the social structure of our everyday life. Nice. And they're young people, you know what I mean?
I agree. So, and the youth is our future. And if we care about the youth, we have to look at the things that our generation, and definitely generations before ours have done, and have not done. and address that and try to correct the problems, which we don't look like we're anywhere close to doing that. So I think the problem is going to continue, and unfortunately, it's probably going to get worse.
Yeah, and I think we just have to be more cautious of what we see and what we label as terrorists, and then look at and get more familiar with policies, worldwide policies.
Just get more informed, get more educated. When somebody's using a label, look it up, see if they're using it correctly.
And then don't let people tap into your emotions.
Exactly. So until next time, peace.
Peace.